I was around 7 years old when my parents moved us into a really old house on the edge of a quiet town. The layout was weird. My bedroom was essentially a small room connected to the attic. It wasn't even supposed to be a bedroom. It had creaky wooden floors, a single small window, and a massive closet with a sliding door. That closet led directly into the attic. The owners before us had used the space as a playroom. Toys were scattered all over the place, especially in the attic closet. It freaked me out. Being a kid and sleeping that close to a dark, echoey attic gave me the creeps. I never felt alone in that room. Then one night something happened. I had watched a scary movie with my family before going to bed. Typical kid mistake. I lay there staring at the ceiling, afraid to close my eyes. That's when I heard it. A soft plastic rattle, like a toy being moved. It was coming from the attic closet. I froze. Then I sprinted to my parents' room in a panic. They calmed me down, said it was just old junk falling over, and let me sleep in their bed. The next night I was back in my room, and it happened again. This time it was louder. The sound of Legos being poured out onto the wooden floor. I screamed and ran again. My dad was annoyed. He locked his door that night and told me to stay in my room. Around 2 a.m. I was wide awake, not moving, not blinking, just staring at that closet. Then the sliding door creaked open, slowly. The moonlight shone through the window, casting a perfect silhouette of a tall figure standing right inside the closet. I couldn't breathe. My voice caught in my throat. Suddenly, the figure jumped down from the closet ledge, landed with a loud thud, and sprinted out of my room, down the stairs and out the front door. My parents heard me scream and came running. My dad searched the house with a kitchen knife, but the man, whoever he was long gone. The police never found him. To this day, I still don't understand how he got into our attic, or how long he had been living in there before I ever saw him. During my 8th grade year, our class went on a school trip called the Louisiana Tour. We visited several historic places, but one in particular stuck with me. Myrtle's Plantation, which is often said to be one of the most haunted homes in the U.S. It was a beautiful but eerie southern mansion. Our group was herded through dusty rooms full of antique furniture and portraits, with eyes that seemed to follow you. In one room, we were standing quietly while the guide talked about the Civil War era and people who once lived in the house. That's when I first heard it. A single piano key, pressed softly, like someone lightly tapped it. I looked around. There was no piano in the room. I leaned toward my friend and asked if he heard it. He said no. I thought I was losing it, until I heard it again. This time I turned my head sharply, scanning the room. Still nothing. Then I noticed a woman standing across the group. She wasn't listening to the tour guide either. She caught my eye, pointed at me, then at her ear. I nodded. She heard it too. Moments later, the guide mentioned something that made the hair on my neck rise. He said that guests had reported hearing piano music in that very room, played by the ghost of a Confederate soldier who died in the house. My jaw went tight. I wasn't imagining it. When the tour ended, I found the woman again. She told me she'd heard the same thing, but her husband and son hadn't. Years later, I still don't know what to believe. But I know what I heard, and I've never forgotten that sound. A piano note played in an empty room by someone who wasn't alive. This story didn't happen to me. It happened to my best friend's parents on their first date. They were both in college at the time and had just gone for dinner. Afterward, her dad, a guy who loved hiking and adventure, suggested they go on a spontaneous midnight hike up Provo Canyon. It was a clear night, no moon, just stars. They parked near the mouth of the canyon and started walking up the trail using nothing but flashlights and starlight. About 20 minutes in, her dad started to feel uneasy, like something was watching them. He brushed it off. A few minutes later, they entered a narrow part of the trail with trees hanging low above them. His gut feeling got worse, but he kept going. Then suddenly his foot hit something soft. They both froze. He aimed his flashlight down, but the beam caught nothing, just shadow and dirt. The feeling in his stomach got worse. He didn't even want to know what it was. He looked at her and said, "Let's go." They turned around and walked quickly back to the car without saying a word. Years later, long after they were married, they were watching a documentary on serial killers. The killer being interviewed was Ted Bundy. The interviewer asked if there was ever a moment when he almost got caught. Bundy paused and said there was one night when he had just killed a girl and was dragging her body into the woods near Provo Canyon. And then he heard voices, a couple coming up the trail. He said he ducked behind the trees and watched as a guy stepped right over the body, froze, then turned around and left. He said he couldn't believe how close he came to getting caught. My friend's parents never doubted after that. They had been feet away from a freshly murdered victim, and possibly from becoming the next ones. I was in my second year of university, and like an idiot, I left my 3,000-word research paper until the night before. Our school library was open until 2 a.m., and the quietest part was the basement, called the Stacks. It was creepy even during the day. Down there, it was just long rows of shelves, dim yellow lights, and absolute silence. I went down at around 11 p.m. Only one other person was there, a guy sitting maybe 4 desks down from me. We both nodded awkwardly and got to work. An hour in, I started to hear something strange. The sound of someone flipping through pages. Fast, like intentionally loud. At first, I ignored it. Maybe someone was skimming a thick textbook, but after 5 minutes, it didn't stop. Pages just flipping, over and over. I stood up to check. The moment I stepped away from my desk, it stopped. Weird, but okay. I sat back down. 10 minutes later, it started again. Louder this time. Way louder. Like someone grabbed an old Bible and was fanning through every single page. Even the other guy got annoyed. He stood up and started walking between shelves. "Yo," he called. No response. I joined him. We both searched the entire room. No one. We were on the only entrance side of the basement. Nobody could have come or gone without passing us. But the sound just vanished. We sat back down. A few minutes later, it started again. This time right next to the other guy's desk. He froze. I froze. Then he grabbed his stuff and said, "F this," and ran. I wasn't far behind. I've never gone back down to the stacks at night, even when I'm desperate. That place wasn't empty. Not really. This happened when I still had my fishing boat. My wife and I had planned a 2-day trip into the North Atlantic just to get away. Day 1 was perfect. Calm waters, good weather, decent catch. That night we played cards inside the cabin with some quiet music playing. The second night was slower. No music, just us. Around 10 p.m. we were mid-game when we heard something. The soft sound of a motor. We both got up and went outside. Through the dark we saw a small beat-up motorboat, no lights on, drifting slowly towards us. A man was piloting it. Middle-aged, beard, baseball cap. He stopped just in front of our bow. I called out, asking if he needed help. He asked, "Got any spare gas?" I said no and asked if he was stuck. He shook his head, said he had plenty of gas. That didn't make sense. So why did he ask? Then came the awkward silence. He just stared at us, not smiling, not moving, just staring. The only reason I could see him at all was because of our deck light. Finally, he said, "Nice catch today." I lied and said it wasn't great. He chuckled. The kind of chuckle that doesn't come from someone who's joking, more like someone who's just studying you. Then, without another word, he turned the boat and drifted away into the blackness. No lights, no sound, just gone. My wife and I were rattled. We turned off all our lights and drifted a few miles north, just in case. Around 2 a.m., I woke up to the sound of her screaming. I shot up and saw him. That same man standing at the foot of our bed in the cabin. I lunged forward, but he was gone before I hit the floor. We rushed outside, his motorboat engine fired up, and he vanished into the ocean again. We sailed back to shore that night. The police never found him. To this day, I don't know how he got on the boat, or what he wanted. When I was in my 4th year of high school, I had the creepiest room in the house. No joke. The layout was strange. Across from my bed, there was a small alcove, like a corner that sat in permanent shadow. The way the closet was built blocked any ceiling light or window glow from hitting that spot. At night, it was pitch black. One night, I was struggling to sleep. I don't know why, but I had this weird feeling like someone was watching me. Not in a normal way, in a deeply malicious way. I opened my eyes, and I swear to God, something was standing in that dark corner, not moving. Just standing there, darker than the shadow around it. I stared at it, not blinking. Then I told myself, "You're imagining it." So I squeezed my eyes shut and tried to force myself to sleep. That's when I heard the floor creak, like someone put weight on it. I opened my eyes again. That shadowy thing was now in the opposite corner of the room. I completely froze. All my instincts screamed danger. I didn't dare move. I just grabbed my pillow and pulled my blanket over my head. I stayed like that for what felt like hours, shaking and silently crying. Eventually, I must have fallen asleep from exhaustion or fear, but that feeling stayed with me. Not a nightmare, not sleep paralysis. I know what I saw, and whatever it was, it wanted me to know that it saw me too. This was the first and last time my entire family went camping together. I was 18. My younger brother and sister were only 11, and they were super excited. We didn't go to a normal campsite. My dad drove us out to the country, parked on the side of a quiet dirt road, and we hiked about a mile into the forest until we found a clearing. We set up 2 tents, one for me and my siblings and one for my parents. Night fell and I couldn't sleep. Sleeping bags are the worst, and the ground was hard. But more than that, something felt off. I was lying on my back, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling of the tent when I heard the sound. The zipper of our tent slowly being unzipped from the outside. I looked up and saw someone's head poking in. "Dad," I whispered. No response. The head disappeared and the zipper was left open. I sat up, heart pounding. Maybe it was my mom or dad just checking on us. So I crawled out of the tent and walked over to theirs. I unzipped their tent and peeked in. Both of them were in their sleeping bags, sound asleep. I shook my dad awake. "Did you just come check on us?" He blinked and said no. I woke up my mom next. She hadn't left the tent either. I stood there in the dark, barefoot in the cold dirt, realizing someone, a complete stranger, had just opened our tent and looked inside. We were a mile into the woods in the middle of nowhere. No one should have been out there. My parents checked the area with flashlights, but we never found anyone. That night, none of us slept. And after that trip, we never went camping again. This happened to my parents on their honeymoon in Key West. They had just checked into a nice old hotel, but there was a small issue. The room they got was non-smoking, and my dad, being a smoker, requested a different one. The receptionist quickly switched them to a room on a different floor. When they got off the elevator, the smell of fresh paint hit them immediately. The whole hallway reeked of it. And down the corridor, a man in painter's overalls was working silently on the wall. Paint buckets and tools all around him. As they walked past him, they said hello. He didn't respond. Not a glance. Not a nod. Just painting. They got to their new room and immediately noticed the paint smell was even worse inside. My mom started coughing. It was that strong. They went back to the front desk to complain. The woman at the counter looked confused. She said, "There's no painting scheduled on that floor today." Still, she gave them a new room. No questions asked. Just 10 minutes later, they went back upstairs to grab their bags. The smell of paint? Completely gone. And the painter? Gone. No tools, no top, not a trace of anything. The hallway looked untouched. The next morning, while waiting for breakfast in the lobby, they overheard a tour guide leading a group through the building. When the guide mentioned their original floor, my parents tuned in. The guide said a painter had died there decades ago, fell down the elevator shaft while working. My parents aren't the type to believe in ghosts, but after that night, they'll never doubt it again. A few years ago, I worked night shift at a 24-hour grocery store in a small town. It wasn't usually busy, maybe 2 or 3 customers after midnight, most of them regulars. One night, around 1:30 a.m., I was doing a shelf reset on aisle 9, the cereal and snacks aisle, when a man entered the store. He didn't look homeless, but there was something off about him. He was wearing a brown coat, jeans, and had the biggest, most unnatural smile I've ever seen. Like someone trying way too hard to look friendly. I greeted him politely, and he just smiled back. Didn't blink, didn't say a word. Just nodded and walked straight past me. Okay, weird, but fine. He walked up and down aisle 9, the same aisle I was working in, 4 or 5 times. Never picked anything up. Just walked slowly, still smiling. I finally asked, "Can I help you find something?" He stopped, turned his whole body toward me, and said, "I already found it." Then he turned around and walked out of the store. I stood there, frozen. I ran to the front door and looked out into the parking lot. He was just standing out there, directly under a street lamp, still smiling. After about 30 seconds, he slowly walked away and disappeared behind the building. I reported it to my manager the next morning. A week later, during my shift, a cop walked in. He asked to review our security tapes from that night. Apparently, a man matching that description had been reported for following people home from the same area. One person said he smiled the whole time, even when they confronted him. I never saw him again, but I don't work night shifts anymore. This happened to my roommate's cousin, and she still doesn't talk about it much. She had just moved into a new apartment building, Cheap rent, basic place, nothing fancy. She worked late shifts and usually got home around midnight. There was a small lot in front of the building with maybe 10 parking spots. Her unit was on the second floor, directly above that lot. She didn't think much of it. Could have been a neighbor or a drunk. A few nights later, it happened again. Same time, same man, same spot. This time she paid more attention. He wasn't on his phone. He wasn't smoking. He was just staring at her window. Every time she glanced out, he was looking right up at her unit. She told her building manager. He said he'd keep an eye out. A few days went by. Nothing. Then one night around 2 a.m., she was getting ready for bed when she heard 3 soft knocks on her bedroom window. Her window is on the second floor. There's no ledge, no balcony, no way to reach it. She froze. Then she heard it again. 3 knocks. Slow. She flipped on the light and yanked the curtains open. No one. The next day, she asked a neighbor if they'd seen anything strange. The woman said, "Actually, yeah. There's been a guy sitting on the rooftop of the building across from us some nights. Doesn't move, just sits facing this way. Rooftop. Direct line of sight to her window. She broke her lease and moved out within the week. I don't blame her. Whoever that man was, he wasn't on the street. He was above her, watching, waiting, and he knew exactly where her window was." Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that red button.